Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our third webinar of the year. Today's webinar will be looking at the role of measurement in reducing food waste. Here in Australia, we use the international best practice approach to reducing food waste of Target Measure Act. This approach, as its name suggests, involves setting a food waste reduction target for your own operations, measuring your food waste in a consistent way, and taking action based on those measurements. With that in mind, we have two really good presentations for you this morning. Firstly, our PACT technical specialist, Emil Kroell, will provide an introduction to food waste, the rationale behind measuring, and some tips on how to get started in your own food waste measurement. Following Emil, we're really fortunate to have Victor Barichello, the co-founder and CEO of Empauer, which is one of Australia's foremost sustainability consultants, and Victor's a leading voice in the food waste space. Victor brings his strong commercial sense to the food waste measurement discussion and will also provide us with an overview of Direct, which is a leading tool in the fight against food waste. If you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them in the chat. We'll go through them and come back to them at the end. But for now, I'll hand over to Emil to kick things off.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all for joining us today. As Nick said, my name is Emil and I work as technical specialist here at End Food Waste Australia. End Food Waste Australia is the government-appointed agency working on reducing food waste by half by 2030. And we're doing that because Australia signed up to the Paris Agreement. You're probably here today because you have a sense that your organization is wasting food, or you know that you're wasting food. And it is always nice to speak to like-minded people, but the fact is that most organizations that we speak to say, we don't have any food waste, we don't send food to landfill, or we compost all the food waste we generate. I'm not here to say that that's not true, but until you've looked in the bins and done some measurements, how do you actually know? Measuring food waste can be very simple, just using your waste contractor's waste data if you separate, or it can be very sophisticated using image recognition and Industry 4.0 capabilities. Today, we are covering some of the foundations and giving you insights into what to be aware of. Before we begin, let's start with an overview over food waste in Australia. We waste about 7.6 million tons of food every year, and that's the same as if we filled the Melbourne cricket ground to the brim with food 10 times every year. It takes a landmass the size of the state of Victoria to grow all this food that we end up just putting in the bin. And this, of course, happens at a time where more than 1 in 3 Australian households skip meals or goes whole days without eating. Close to half of all the food that we throw out goes to landfill, and here it produces methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So not only is there a lot of energy, water, and greenhouse gases that goes into growing and transporting and cooking our food, when we throw it out, it produces even more greenhouse gases. So taking action on food waste offers a rare triple win for food businesses. We found that the food waste among the members of the Australian Food Pact are about 5.6% of total sales. At a global scale, food waste emits 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions, and that's more than the aviation industry. If you take action on food waste, you are part of the fight against hunger. A good route to reduce food waste is to send it to food rescue. And if we get better at using our natural resources, we have a better chance of feeding the 10 billion people that will be in 25 years. So it's important for me to say that companies who ignore this opportunity will continue to waste money and resources. Every year, we collect food waste data from leading food companies who are part of the Australian Food Pact. And based on this, we can see that for a business of around $230 million in revenue, The cost of ingredients lost as food waste is about 3% of their revenue. It costs them around $1.4 million in disposal costs to get rid of the food waste. And if they do repurpose the food, for example, sell it to animal feed, then they miss out on about $11.5 million in lost sales opportunities. So all up, the food waste bill for this company of $230 million comes to about 8.5% of the business revenue, which I'm sure could have been put to better use. Before we dive in, we need to get our definitions right. So we were appointed by federal government, so we can't endorse greenwashing. That's why we stick to the definition of food waste as described in the National Food Waste Hierarchy, which again is aligned with international protocols. And that is that food waste is the waste of any solid or liquid food that is made for humans, whether it's lost pre or post-consumer, also if it's not manufactured in Australia. It does include what we consider inedible parts, as well as food made for export, but which is lost before leaving Australia. We work to the so-called food and drink material hierarchy, and all the green actions count towards food waste reduction. And we focus on getting the most out of the food for the members of the pact and the planet, and that means moving it up the waste hierarchy. We're trying to avoid direct disposal, for example, to landfill, and it is also important to remember that composting is still considered food waste, though it is, of course, much better for the climate than sending it to landfill. So the best option is to avoid food waste in the first place, then upcycle and repurpose the food. Donation is also critical at the moment to feed those in need, but sending to animal feed is acceptable if we can't find a better use. So as I mentioned before, when it comes to data collection, it's important to not let perfection stand in the way of progress. If your organization is not used to collecting or analyzing data, you should start simple. The very first step can be to record the data that you get back from your organic waste contractor. This, of course, relies on you separating food waste and nothing else. Discuss the numbers that you get back with people from operations. Is it trending up or down? Can you see peaks or troughs? And can you explain those? And already from this basic level of information, you can start to get a picture of what the likely volume and cost of the food waste is. The next level is that you can look at what data you already have available internally. We'll go into a lot more detail on this in a little bit. The last step includes measuring at specific waste points in production. Unless you are running a fully integrated Industry 4.0 facility, you'll likely have to get out the pen and paper at this level. But the greater the detail, the more targeted action you can take. But again, that being said, even with a coarse picture, it will give you an outline of the issue and you can discuss potential solutions with the team. So borrowing from continuous improvement and a bit of change management, measuring your food waste fits into 5 steps. First, you need buy-in from everybody who are involved with measurements and the later improvements. Start by explaining why it's important to reduce food waste for your business, the planet, and the people. Choose whatever scope you need, which speaks to your audience. Make sure that you have support from senior management in your organization and that they have told everybody to get on board. And get a team together to support you. You probably meet a bit of resistance, so make sure to use positive language, avoid any sense of blame. Next, you need to define the scope of what you'll be measuring. How long a period will the measurements cover? What material types will be included? Where is the waste currently being sent? And choose a single unit of measurement from the get-go. And now you are ready to do the actual measurements. We'll get into the databases that you can look in, and there are also several methods for quantifying your waste. In order to make a change, you will likely have to make a business case. So collect costs of ingredients, labor, and so forth from the get-go. You might need to scale your data to cover a full year to compare it to your financial records. You can compare your waste data to revenue for the same period or production volume to calculate waste cost per dollar earned or production losses per tons produced. You'll need some totals to compare your data to, and with this information, you'll be able to scale up your data. When you've completed your food waste measurements and scaled up your data, you can identify hotspots and you can identify trends. This will allow you to find the root causes of waste and start to improve. It's important to measure waste both before and after any process change to confirm that the change is actually reducing food waste. But before we talk about how you get to your waste data, we'll go through a couple of case studies. So we published the Catering Sector Action Plan earlier this year, which was developed in collaboration with leading catering businesses here in Australia. We asked each of the caterers to give us data on food waste from 15 different categories. Where in the internal value chain the waste was occurring. Was it in spoilage? Was it prep? Was it served but not eaten? Or was it from plate waste? We asked them to normalize against the number of meals served in the same period. And we also asked where that food waste was sent, whether it was sent to waste destinations such as landfill or compost, or recovery destinations such as food donation or animal food. What we found was that there's about an even spread between waste sources. 17% was wasted in storage, 25% was wasted from prep or in prep stage, 30% was served, for example, in a bain-marie but not eaten, and 28% were left on plate. The most wasted foods were fruit and vegetables and cooked meals and sandwiches. We also found that on average, 167 grams of food was wasted for every meal served, and a meal is about 500 grams on average. 99% of all this waste went to waste destinations, and the majority of that went to landfill. You can find the full report on our website. Another case study from the bakery sector is from Bob and Pete's Bakery, who sell into wholesale. In their fast-paced environment, considering wasted opportunities to reduce it were often missed, but they found that reporting the value loss at daily briefings provided the opportunity to stop, reflect, and improve processes. So they've changed how waste was communicated to production staff, which has resulted in a 6.5% reduction in operations waste. So what they did was, in daily briefings, they reported lost value caused by waste. The operation manager updated staff daily on waste, for example, by telling them today we lost $100 of ingredients. They brought the staff together to collaborate to solve issues, and they discussed the causes and solutions to prevent it from happening. And they made sure to celebrate good days and learn from them. So what's next for Bob and Pete's is that they will continue to set targets for their daily waste and to continue their success. This case study was produced in collaboration with the Baking Association of Australia and industry players. The last case study for today is from horticulture. And Food Waste Australia are running trials in Australia using the WWF tool to measure on-farm food losses, which is a bit of an unknown at the moment. Unfortunately, we can't speak to any of our findings yet because it is still confidential. But it involves measuring how much produce is left after the harvesters. So the method is that you pick 3 places in the field at random, Some recommend covering 1 to 10% of the total field. Others say some data is better than none. You need to harvest everything that is left in the field and categorize and weigh what is marketable, what is edible but not marketable, and what is inedible. Here's a case study from the US which reflect our findings quite well. So 15% of the strawberries in this case study was simply left behind by the harvesters because they didn't see them or they went too fast, or they were outside of retailer specs, so they decided not to harvest. These 15% could have been sold into a wholesale market. There was another 10% which were edible but didn't have a market, so these could have been sent to processing. So the strawberry growers in this example, they could have sent 25% more fruit to market, recovering both water and inputs and some of the costs that have gone into the strawberries. So when it comes to reporting food waste, the necessary data can be found in different databases that your organization probably already have. There are some examples of key information here that you can pull from each system. Enterprise resource planning or ERP systems are often a gold mine for food waste data. They track incoming and outgoing goods. They include estimated loss factors and the value of the inputs. And remember to look for these estimated default loss factors when figuring out waste from ERP data. You can also use procurement systems, which can tell you about incoming goods. They'll often have information about repurposing efforts like sending food to animal feed and the cost of the ingredients. Quality systems can provide detail on the volume of waste and the reasons for rejects, and also where the rejects ended up, for example, secure burial. Rejects are often counted in units, so you probably have to convert this into weight. Point of sale systems are a rich source of sales data with detailed information about timings. This can be used to normalize your waste data and calculate yields. Environmental management software, or EMS, captures data on waste streams, their destinations, and greenhouse gas emissions. These can also track effluent waste and waste from wastewater treatments. Our last example of databases that are useful for getting data from is finance systems. These hold loads of data on incoming and outgoing goods, waste destinations, costs, and efficiencies in general. So if you haven't made friends with someone in finance already, it's a good idea to get started because this department holds a lot of data relevant for food waste tracking. Whether your organization is engaged in continuous improvement or you're just starting on the journey of improving performance by reducing waste, you will likely find that you need more detailed data on where food waste is occurring and what is in those food waste streams. Here, I have pulled out 4 simple but powerful methods for quantifying your waste. The 4 methods are weighing and counting your food waste, volume assessment, mass balance, and waste composition analyses. I'll give you a quick overview of what you'll need to execute the measurement with each of the methods, what you should make sure to record, and how you scale those measurements to cover the full scope of your business. So weighing and counting is self-explanatory. Weighing, you need scales, and the scales need to be somewhat dedicated to the task of measuring food waste. You need to write down where in your value chain or process the measurement was done, and when and what products were measured. You want to normalize the measurement against revenue or total numbers of units produced or total volume of production. If you're counting, you'll need to set yourself up to convert between units into volume or weight, which is the standard. Assessing volume is the process of measuring or approximating the space occupied by food waste. This method is ideal for liquid waste, but it can also be applied to solid and semi-solid material in waste and skip bins, and it can be a very quick and easy way to estimate waste. You'll need to measure and record the volume of the waste, and of course the density of the waste, along with the usual where, when, and what was wasted. To scale up your data, you'll need your density and normalize against total volume of production over the scope of the measurement, for example, 1 full year. Mass balance is the method to calculate food waste based on inputs, outputs, and stock on hand. You'll need the total inputs, and that is all ingredients that have gone into your process, and then you subtract all of the outputs. You will also need to know what stock you had to begin with and any adjustments to the stock, for example, donated stock. It's important that all your data is in a single unit of measurement. We recommend kilos. And as always, you need to record where and when and what was measured. So these first 3 methods require you to do a lot better. The last method, which is waste composition analyses, can be outsourced. And it is a very powerful tool where you can use contractors or other waste experts. So with this method, the company that's providing you the service will ask you to confirm the location and collection frequency of your bins to figure out what the best time is to analyze. You'll need to settle on a set of categories to measure against, for example, fruit, veg, bakery, meats, and so forth. Again, you'll need a single unit of measurement and consider how you will normalize the data, for example, against units sold or revenue. The Food Loss and Waste Protocol have a great resource on guidance on quantification methods where you can look for more information about this. You're also very welcome to reach out to us for help with quantification. It's soon time for me to hand over to Victor from Empauer, but before I hand over, here is our take-home message. If you want to get started on reducing your food waste, start with these 5 activities. And as I said in the beginning, measuring food waste can be done in ways that are very simple and very sophisticated. So start where you are and remember that some data is better than none. First, agree with your team who leads your food waste efforts. That is, find your champion. Start separating food waste from all other waste streams and record how much food waste you have. When you have an idea about the volume of waste, discuss why it's happening with colleagues. If you've done all of this, you have a baseline for your food waste and you now can pilot some changes and analyze the outcomes. Before I hand over, I need to mention that food waste happens at every stage of the food supply chain. So if you grow, make, move, sell, or buy food, you are an important part of the fight against food waste. And Food Waste Australia spans everything from a world-leading research center where we research everything from upcycling strawberries to packaging's effect on food waste. We collaborate with industry in the Australian Food Pact and the sector action plans, and we support industry innovation and evidence-based policy development by governments and industry. We're also launching a nationwide consumer-facing campaign this year, and that's to tackle the 32% of food waste happening in households. So please reach out if you have any questions about food waste or want to take action. My email will be on the last slide. And now over to you, Victor.
Emil, thank you very, very much for that. That was extremely comprehensive and I appreciated all the detail. Before I start, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity of being here today. I really do appreciate it. It's a great opportunity to talk about a topic that's quite near and very dear to my heart. Yeah, unlike every other standard presentation, I'm not going to go into the numbers. Emil did a fantastic job and provided the background. But before I go into the presentation, I want to be very clear and make it known that I think that data is the bedrock of everything that we do. in the area of food waste. How we collect the data is absolutely critical, because by collecting the data, we then understand the scope of the problem. And the ultimate reason that we collect data is that we have enough information so that we can actually go through and manage the situation efficiently. So the whole point of getting data is that we're able to get to a point where we can manage what we're doing. Emil, if you can just go through to the next page, that'd be great. Okay, cool. Everybody tends to believe that they know what the problems are in their organisations, and that's not always necessarily the case. A lot of us know people who deal with opinions and ideas, but what we're trying to do in actually measuring is quantifying and providing real facts that we can work upon. Once we have those, we're going to be in a position of being able to give people a really good understanding of some of the economic impacts that waste occurs. So let's be completely frank about it. We all work for businesses, and those businesses are all cost conscious. In other instances, the opportunity to measure is to also understand environmental impacts. So if we're using other diagnostic tools such as LCAs, that measurement helps us inform that information. And ultimately, one of the real reasons that we do this is to understand and create benchmarks for improvement and opportunities for waste reduction. The last point, which is not on the slide, is to validate what we're doing. So in some instances, organisations are performing really, really well, but they're a little bit unsure. So the opportunity to measure gives them an opportunity to validate what they're doing. It's not necessarily to apportion blame or anything, but it's to understand where you're at. So we can just go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the business case. So I mentioned before that we need the information in order to make some business decisions. But it's also understanding where those problems or situations may lie. So it's good to have a hotspot analysis, and this is what we're able to do as a part of our measurement. The reason, again, I keep going back, we do this is to understand what decisions need to flow on from that information. One of the key aspects that we look at from a business case is to consider where problems are sometimes seen and how we can turn those problems into opportunity for valorization. Now, I'll give a bit of a case study later on when I talk about direct, but it's really important to appreciate that in most instances, there's an opportunity to actually extract revenue or financial value from the waste that is generated. So we can go back to the next slide. Okay, so, and I'm only doing all this at a very high level because if I had to spend I could probably run this topic for a day if I needed to. So everything here is on a high level. So the economic burden of food waste, there's really three things that I see this, and I've highlighted there. They're the direct costs of what we're doing. So the actual cost of food production, transportation and disposal, we're able to quantify those pretty quickly. The indirect costs, such as environmental impacts, labour, wasted resources, they're also worth considering. But the one thing that quite often gets missed is the opportunity cost, is what have been the benefits of that waste and loss if we could actually reduce it. So the whole point of measurement is to understand, I'm purely talking economics here, is to understand what the economic impacts are, and that will actually flow on to how the decisions can be justified. And go next slide. Okay, Emil did a fantastic job in describing the sources of data. But if I was to provide a snapshot, and Emil, that was brilliant what you did, by the way. I haven't seen anything in a presentation with that detail before, so thank you for doing it. But essentially, we're working with two buckets of data. It's quantitative and qualitative. And as Emil put in the quantitative areas, there's lots of systems where we can get data from, and there's lots of avenues to get that data. And that's really, really important. So at any point in time, if anybody feels like they're at a loss as to where to go, there are opportunities there. And what Emil highlighted, which I will talk about a little bit later, is that this is a team game. You can't do this by yourself. There are lots of people out there that can help you. And yeah, Emil, if I can steal that slide off you at some point in time, I will, because it was excellent. The qualitative stuff is actually trying to understand how things have happened over a period of time. Sometimes it could be cultural, sometimes it could be a managerial thing, but you need to examine those things. And more importantly, you've got to be able to extract that information, and that's where you get value out of it. So next slide, please, Emil. Okay, so the data collection methods, which I've probably given a lot of credit to Emil's work before, can really fall into a couple of buckets here, and that's surveys and audits. So regular assessments over a period of time are really important. Be aware that if you do an assessment or a review, you might get a bad day where you've had an anomaly happen and it looks bad. But if you do it over a period of time and you average it out, that'll give you a pretty good indication of where you're going. So surveys and audits, very important. The other thing that is coming into play now are smart technologies. So IoT devices, sensors, AI for real-time tracking. We were talking to people about spatial mapping the other day, and drones. All these things are coming into play. Now, whether or not they actually are relevant to your organisation, I'm not too sure, but for some people they are. The other thing is that there are a lot of software solutions out there. So there are solutions that actually can help you extract information. And as Emil said, there's ERP systems, environmental systems where you can extract information and embed that into your tool. But essentially, there is technology out there to help you measure food waste. We will talk about that, what we've got with Direct. So we'll move to that in a moment. So Emil, if we can just move forward a slide. Okay, so what are the challenges? Really what we're dealing with here is, the data accuracy and consistency. One of the things that concerns me, and pretty much everybody in the area of sustainability, is accurate data and not allowing people to game the system. Data can be chopped and changed many ways. We want to make sure it's accurate and it's consistent with methodologies. The reason I mention that is because there's ISO standards, the Food Loss and Waste Protocol. There's a whole bunch of other things that are out there. We want to ensure that those are all kept and everybody's playing by the same rules. The integrating of data from different systems we've spoken about in terms of advancing technology, yes, that's coming all the time. So there's always opportunities for improvement. And as I keep going back, the collaborative efforts and partnerships are absolutely really, really important. And to that point, collaboration portals are coming into play where people have discovered some information and then they should be sharing it across the supply chain. It's incredibly important. We're seeing some changes in policy and regulations across the world, where we as Empauer are very close to the people out at ReFed in the US, and we're starting to have things come through from there that we think will be of value to us here in the future. And again, I've just said it, reducing food waste is a team effort. So just move to the next slide, please. All right, let me talk to you a little bit about Direct. Emil, if you want to move to the next slide, you're cool. Okay, so Direct is a piece of software that we here at Empauer developed in collaboration with RMIT as a part of what was the Fight Food Waste CRC. It was a methodology that was built up over 8 years, tried and tested. I think RMIT did something like over 80 trials testing the methodology. We've certainly gone through a lot of trials and case studies ourselves and pilots to test the software itself. So it's a fairly sophisticated tool. It's based on mass balance. We're in alignment with 3 ISO standards, Food Loss and Waste Protocol as well, that comes from the WRI. So from a sophistication point of view, it's a pretty good tool. But what it basically allows you to do, it allows you to measure and track and assess information so that you're able to understand the hotspots and all the associated costs of food waste. So it does that by mapping your food and non-food material flows and also your associated costs. So as Emil mentioned before, it's based on mass balance. It's that approach. So we're looking at all the inputs and outputs, and we're looking at all the variables that go to actually manufacturing the product. So it's just not the product itself, it's everything around it. And then it becomes a matter of the level of detail you want to dig into to understand what it can do for you. But it's a very, very sophisticated tool in terms of what it can do. Ultimately, what you can do is quantify the true cost of your waste. And that's very, very important because that helps us inform people up the upper echelons of management. And again, if you want to prove a business case, you've got to go in with facts. One of the beautiful things about Direct is that you're able to do some scenario testing, so you can actually model what you're currently doing and what you propose to do in the future, and you can compare and contrast where the opportunities for improvement may lie. But ultimately, it's all about resource efficiency. So, next slide, please. Okay, so here is Direct in what I call 60 seconds. It's measuring the true cost of waste. It's giving you insights into your business and supply chain. It helps you understand and help you report the outcomes that can support a change program within your organization. You can also turn the material losses into financial gains, and that's again through that opportunity cost we spoke about before. We can integrate it with other ERP systems, so not only can we extract information, but we can also hook it in to other systems, and as I mentioned before, it aligns to some of the standards and international protocols. So next slide, please. This is a case study which we talk about quite often. We have other case studies on our website. You're welcome to go have a look at them. But this one here is of particular interest to me because of the size of the organisation, the type of organisation, and what we found. So the client, large ag sort of business, came to us, didn't believe they had a problem, which shouldn't be a shock to anybody. They were very confident that they had everything under control. So they got us in to essentially do an audit for them. They believed that the loss on one farm, this is one farm, one site, was approximately $10,000 a week. We took the Direct methodology to them, and we actually went through and did an audit. Now, as you will see on the screen here, we found the true cost of their waste wasn't $520,000 for the year, it was $14.7 million. That's an extraordinary number, and that's just off of one site. Now, I will say it's a true cost of waste, so we actually considered everything, but nonetheless, that is a big number. And if you can consider the size of this organisation in totality, and they have a lot of sites across Australia, if we extrapolate that, then the true cost of waste for that business is over $700 million. And that's scary. So having this information is very, very powerful. And again, none of this information is to be used to beat up on people. It's to highlight where the opportunities for improvement can be. So that's the one thing that we always make very clear in terms of what we do. Use it for the benefit of good. Don't use it to slight somebody or to put somebody in a corner. It's not about that at all. It's about giving them information. Now, this client, to their credit, took a lot of the things that we found and went through and started doing reviews across their other business. I'm actually going to be talking to these people in the next couple of weeks, so I'll be keen to see what they've been doing since we last met. But this case study was the foundation of what they were going to do in the future, and it really shone a light on the opportunities for improvement here. So next slide, please. So what are the real benefits Direct? Well, it's going to give you comprehensive tracking food loss and waste and understand what loss and waste occurs throughout the production process. You can look at upstream and downstream situations when it comes to food loss. It helps you in management and understanding some of your objectives. Ultimately, it's there to help you reduce costs, or it's there to validate what you're doing. So, that's the one thing I'm really, really keen to push because it can validate what you're doing. Not everything needs to look bad. And it also finds opportunities where you can potentially make some more money. Now, with that case study that I mentioned, I can't talk about the actual client as such, but one of the things that they do, they actually manufacture, or their produce has a lot of fibre. And that fiber can be used in vegan leather, which is very, very expensive and sought after by companies such as Louis Vuitton or Chanel. Our client is talking to people that produce vegan leather because they have an excess of product where they can extract the fiber. They, in the past, would just trash that product. So they've found an opportunity for a revenue stream based on the opportunity that we discovered with them for direct. So the whole point of it here is that there's always opportunities to do something else. Next slide. So in summary, it's really important to measure, as Emil pointed out, data collection methods, they're always challenging, but they're there. Look for actionable insights and use the measurement results to help inform management decisions. The one thing that I would implore everybody to do is to actually engage in conversations with management. And my question to a lot of people when it comes to these matters is talk to your CFOs, talk to your CEOs, get their input and help you get to where you need to get to when it comes to food waste. Don't be siloed. And that's pretty much my presentation. So thank you for the opportunity to present. I think this presentation is going to be shared, but if you've got any questions, happy to answer them now, or please feel free to drop me an email. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor, and thanks, Emil. Really, really interesting presentations there, and I love the focus that you have, Vic. It's an opportunity, and unless you measure it, you don't know how big that opportunity is. So that's really great to remember. We've got a few questions. Some were sent in advance. Victor, what are the biggest challenges in securing data to complete an assessment?
All right. I pretty much covered that towards the last point. There's a lot of siloed aspects to getting data, and you've really got to work in with other people. That's really what it gets down to. It gets down to communication and asking the right questions, understanding what data exists, because strangely, the data is there. Most organizations have it. They just don't know how to find it, or they just don't value it as such. So yeah, it's communicating, understanding where to look. So sometimes it could be internal, sometimes it could be external. So it could be like your waste management companies, and also industry reports are worth looking at as well. So, that's really key. One of the things I didn't cover in the presentation is collaboration portals. So I know retail is looking to create these so that they're getting their suppliers to provide information to them. Although it's, could be anonymized and this doesn't necessarily need to be brand specific, but having an understanding of what's going on in the industry as well. So a lot of it is all down to collaboration. Just ask.
Thank you. One for Emil, quite a technical one. Emil, why should you include inedible parts of the food?
So from Australia's perspective, it's part of the target of having food waste by 2030. That target includes inedible. But if we put it into economic terms, when you buy your raw material, you are paying for the inedible parts too. When you buy bananas, they come with skin. If you buy potatoes, they come with peel on. So targeting the inedible parts as well might open up some of these opportunities that Victor also spoke to. You might find that you could actually make better use of what you previously thought was inedible. It's not just high-end restaurants that can make a new product out of waste streams. We see it in packaged consumer goods as well.
So do you have to measure all food waste from your operations?
You don't have to start out by measuring all the food waste from your operations, as long as you're very clear when you document the information, the measurements that you do, where the measurements were taking place and what's excluded. Obviously, at the end of the day, you want to get to a point where you do include all food waste, but if you have a gut feeling about some of the processes, some of the products that are producing the most waste, I would recommend starting with those and then gradually move on to the complete scope of your processes. it's a good way to think about it, to use the good old 80-20 rule to find the 20% of the causes of waste that'll address 80% of the total volume of waste.
Emil, if I can just add to that, I think it's important that there's a level of acceptance that some waste does occur. Not 100% of a product usually gets used, but obviously we're trying to reduce that level of percentages as much as we can. And I find that from time to time when I'm talking to clients is that they sometimes beat themselves up when we deal with almond producers. You're not going to eat the shell, but you could do something with the shell, but it's inedible.
Yeah.
And it's trying to get their level of understanding and say, well, that's the reality of your product. So don't beat yourself up. It's just a reality of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that growth mindset that you can continuously improve your business is the important part. And as I've said a couple of times, I think don't let perfection stand in the way of progress. It's better to get started than to grind to a halt. Yeah.
Okay, and there's some coming through the chat. So what is the next step in planning? What is the next step you're planning to have after quantifying the food waste? So once you've measured and quantified, what's the next step? Taking action, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Victor, go for it.
Yeah, look, that's a good question. We get asked that quite often. Like, you give us the data, so what? What we're doing is we're actually going back to the clients and saying to them, okay, this is what we've found. How do we actually mitigate for that now? Where are the opportunities for us? Consider most organisations that we deal with know their industries incredibly well. One of the things that we're looking to do in the next 6 months is actually build a database to understand where various products or ingredients could be valorised. So mapping that is really important for us. But essentially, most organisations know their industry very well, and they've got the management skills in order to take that information or that data and turn it into information and turn it into some financial revenue for them. So it's really mapping it all, finding those opportunities. But essentially what we do in the initial stages is identify where the problems are, and then we work with them in turning it into the opportunities. So unfortunately, there's not a silver bullet to all those things, because they require quite a lot of intel and expertise into those industries. So, but that's the opportunity for them, is to actually explore where the opportunities are.
And if I could just add to that, Victor, that was spot on. So what we usually do with the members of the Australian Food Pact is that first we collect the data, and then we do what we call a hotspot analysis, figuring out where are the biggest waste hotspots. We then go on to do a root cause analysis on those hotspots, figuring out what is actually the cause. You might find that there's spillover effects. So if you solve one cause of waste in one part of your value chain, that has knock-on effects. That's the perfect case, right? And then, of course, as I think I mentioned before, implement some pilots, do some tests, see if you move that conveyor belt slightly, or use a peel instead of a knife on your pumpkins, or whatever it is. See what effect it has on the waste that comes out at the end. And it doesn't need to be set in stone from the beginning. You can pilot something. If it doesn't work, that's okay. You try it, revert back. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. There's a question from Rob Anderson. Hey, Rob. Nice to have you on the call. Are there any estimates as to how we are sitting against the ambition to halve food waste from 2017 levels in Australia and or globally? I don't know if we have an answer to that right now. I think there's some a measurement program due to take place later this year, which might give us an idea, but data is pretty hard to come by, both in Australia and globally on a large scale. Individual businesses we can do, but globally and countrywide it's quite difficult. Do either of you have anything to add, or would like to respond to that one?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
When we started working with CRC, the reason that it was attractive to us to invest into it was because we could provide data that could feed a benchmark, a national benchmark tool. So that's what we're creating. That's what we're doing. Talking to the guys overseas, talking to some fairly significant organisations overseas. They're interested in having that benchmarking as well. So this will take time because you need a critical mass of data. You can't just pluck it out and say, well, this is what the number is for Australia. It's going to take a while. And I think once we come down to, I wouldn't say mandatory reporting, but reporting that is submitted to an organisation that does the right thing with it, then I think we can get a clear picture of how industry is tracking over a period of time. And I think it's important, like, just Emil's comment about don't let perfection get in the way. Not everything exists today, right? We're working towards that. So as long as we understand that, we're fine. But expecting people to have that information today may not necessarily, in their eyes be unrealistic, but we're working towards it. It doesn't exist at this point in time.
I see. Yeah, we need more people to get involved and get measuring.
Yeah.
We've still got some questions coming through, but we're a bit short on time at the moment. So any that we don't answer in this session, we will respond to outside of the session. But for one final one, anonymous attendee asked, which measures have you proposed or got success in reducing food waste once you measure food waste in restaurants? And I think the follow-up for that was that it was mainly related to consumer behavior changes.
Sorry, could you repeat that question again? I just didn't.
Yeah, they're talking about sort of measures that have proposed or been successful in reducing food waste in restaurants once you've measured.
Yeah,
in terms of the consumer waste in restaurants.
Absolutely. So there's a number of different things that you can do in restaurants. I think it's important to say that starting back of house in the kitchens and make sure that nothing goes to waste in storage is a good place to start, because it's very much under the operator's control. In terms of changing behaviors of people eating out, it's very important to make sure that the guests, patron, whatever we call it, at the venue understands how much food they are ordering. It's been found both here in Australia and internationally that being served too much food is one of the common causes of plate waste. It obviously needs to be done in a way that respects that you're still producing value, delivering value for your guests, but clearly communicating the size of your portions and allowing people to order smaller sizes, whether they're called light versions, senior sizes, whatever you choose to call them, is a really good way to start reducing food waste. And training your front of house staff in communicating this to the guest is also very important. I hope that covers the question.
Would you like to add anything, Victor, before I...
Yeah, just very quickly on that one there. I've actually noticed restaurants that are putting a surcharge on food that isn't eaten. Mm. And when I first saw that, I thought, that's brilliant. I don't know how they're calculating it, but I thought it was brilliant. That's incentive to order what you need, not what you want.
See if that catches on. Okay, so, well, thank you so much to everyone for attending today. Thank you for the questions that came through. Cam and Gautami, I'll get to yours outside of the webinar. Just to remind everyone that we have our National Food Waste Summit in July in Melbourne. If anybody would like to come along and hear about global and Australian action on food waste, the QR code there can be used to access the booking site. So thanks again. Thank you, Emil, and thank you so much, Vic, for agreeing to come along and share your expertise and the direct tool with us today. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.